You're listening to the E2C Network, podcast by Auburn fans for Auburn fans. War Eagle Auburn family, and welcome back to Inside the Jungle, your source for Auburn men's basketball analysis and discussion here on the E2C Network. We finally found the time to do it. Yes, we are going to be breaking down the season as a whole for 2020 and 2021. The years ran together. Let's be honest, folks. The 20s are just not doing so good for all of us at this point, but we're breaking down the season that was in the middle of COVID for the Auburn men's basketball team. We're going to talk about the games, the preseason, a little bit more about the postseason that we haven't discussed yet. All that's going to be included here on this episode. And to do that, to break it all down, I've got my friend and my co-host, Mr. Gray Oldenburg. Gray, welcome back.
Thank you.
We got not the most to talk about in the world in terms of we don't have a postseason to break down. We don't have that type of thing. But, for a year where the Tigers didn't get to participate in any type of tournament, SEC or otherwise, there was a lot going on in the postseason for Auburn.
Yeah. And it's exciting, and it's good to, look ahead and, talk about that stuff in the postseason. But, we got to nail what's happened in the past, and we've got to move on.
Are you telling me you want to put this one to bed?
Yes.
But this is a year that has Sharif Cooper. This is a year that had the phenom Justin Powell that I know you love hearing his name.
Well, he's, again, it's in the past. We got to let that dude go.
This is going to be like pulling teeth for Gray, I can already tell. But anyway, so what we're going to do here, we've actually broken down a lot of the postseason stuff already. We were putting this show off because there was so much in motion roster-wise for this program, even without a true postseason tournament or anything like that. So we kind of tried to wait to see how things settled out. And I think we finally gotten to a moment where things might have settled. Of course, I've said that, and tomorrow when you're hearing this, probably we'll have some more outstanding breaking news. So for those of you that are wanting to hear us break down Desi Stills, Walker Kessler, we're going to do that. You're just going to have to wait a few more minutes into the episode. So let's rewind the tape. Let's go back to before the 2020-21 season started. And I think we have to address this right off because basically it's been everybody's world, whether you're a basketball fan or not. COVID-19 struck the entire world, but especially the sports world. It took away NCAA basketball and March Madness from us in 2020, and we were all worried, were we going to get a season at all with the way things were going in our world? So, Gray, take me back to November, October, that time, and season's getting ready to start, or it should be starting. Were you worried? Were you concerned that we were going to be having a full season?
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody in the sports world and everybody who was a fan of basketball and kind of saw, the struggles that, the NFL might have had and college football might have had. And it was, it wasn't getting as much better at that time. So it was, of course it worried us, because we want college basketball. We want to be able to come on here and talk about the Auburn Tigers men's basketball team. And so, yeah, I was worried, but it turned out pretty well. We had no COVID cancellations for Auburn, at least. So, and no really COVID troubles. So it's good. We kept everybody safe. We took the measures that we had to take, and hopefully we'll, get back to as normal as possible for this next year.
Yeah, I think each new day is obviously showing a promise that things are moving back to what we would consider a normal type of atmosphere for sports as time goes on. And I do have to say that I'm proud of the way that the Auburn Tigers especially were able to handle things. That doesn't necessarily mean that those teams and those individuals on those teams that were having to deal with some COVID-19 stuff weren't doing their best possible. But it just means sometimes you're a little bit unlucky. And there were some teams in the SEC that were ravaged by it. South Carolina is one of them. I think Florida had some problems too, but they also had a big scary injury for one of their star players that kind of rocked their world too. There were several teams throughout the nation, but especially the SEC that had a few troubles with that. Thankfully, Auburn didn't have that because they had plenty of other troubles that happened throughout this season. It could have just been one bit of icing on the cake for what was a very entertaining and somewhat perplexing, but also just overall interesting season for the Auburn Tigers. So, I think the big story for this is obviously Auburns were gypped out of participating in the 2020 NCAA tournament, as everyone was. And there was a lot of people that thought that Auburn was on a trajectory at the end of that season to potentially make some noise again in the NCAA tournament. This team returns not a lot of these starters, but was bringing in a lot of talent. A JT Thor, potentially a Sharif Cooper. There was a lot of buzz about, Justin Powell as well. And we hadn't even seen that really come to fruition until a couple of games into the season. So, when you looked at this team, what did you think about them at the start of the season? Were you feeling like this was, before we got a particular announcement, so keep that in mind, but were you thinking this was a NCAA tournament team at least? Did you think they were a Sweet 16 team? What was your perspective of the team?
Yeah, I kind of thought they'd be an NCAA tournament team. They had talent. They brought back, some experience from the past year, and brought back a lot of, freshmen who were coming into their sophomore year this past year. And, we're improving, and they brought in the highest rated recruit in program history at the time, and, brought in some other talent around him. And, I thought, I did think this team was going to be a tournament team, and especially with the coaching, and, we didn't really know what other teams in the SEC were going to look like, but, it didn't, then we got the news.
Yes, the news. Well, lots of different news. The first thing, there were rumors starting to circulate. There were then substantiated rumors that Sharif Cooper was going to be ineligible, at least for part of the season. And he was not going to be able to start right off, which put Auburn in a bit of a bind because they didn't really have a point guard outside of Tyrell Turbo Jones. And, I was actually really excited for him to finally get a chance to prove himself. I will say, based on how things went for him and how his playing time dwindled, it didn't work out so well. But at least we know that he was given a fair chance and opportunity to make that happen. But Sharif Cooper did not play until at least, I think it was what was it, Gray? 2 games into SEC play or something like that?
Yeah, it was the Alabama game.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. That was the Alabama game. But yeah, so Sharif Cooper ineligible, and it seemed like, as it typically does, the NCAA was dragging its feet.
Absolutely.
And being very, very frustrating. Did we ever get heads or tails on what their deal was? What about that?
No, but all of a sudden, I think that week at the Alabama game, we started hearing rumors of, Cooper's able to practice again. He's working out with the team again. He's sitting, on the sidelines again. And I think we kind of start to hear rumors that he would, be able to play, or, maybe down the line he would be able to play. And then the day of the Alabama game, we heard the news that Sharif Cooper will start tonight. And it was big. It was huge. I mean, a guy of that, stature of talent that you're bringing in, and the impact on the game that he made from not just the Alabama game, but for the rest of the season when he was on the floor, it was so different.
Mm-hmm. And it's one thing too, when you hear somebody that's so highly touted and a lot of expectations for them, to be sitting there and just wondering what if, but when you see him actually get on the floor and see what he does, that was like, wow. Then you really start asking the question, what if? Then you really start asking the question, well, if this player got to play with this player and that player, what if? Yeah. I mean, that really is going to be the season. And we thought we're going to say that a lot, and we probably should still, about the 2020 tournament that was taken away from us and everybody else, because we will wonder what happened for Javon McCormick and Austin Wiley's last year. Yeah. We probably would have seen a nice little run in the NCAA tournament, but we'll ask even more, what if Sharif Cooper had a full season? What if Justin Powell was his shooting guard? What if this injury? There's so many unknowns here, and I think that's what is frustrating about this season, because there were so many potential things that could have happened out there. This was an Auburn team that just, for whatever reason, couldn't get things to align right for them at times. Speaking of, not shortly after the announcement that Sharif Cooper would not be participating at least the start of the season, we also I felt like it was a week maybe before the season started, we got the announcement that Auburn had declared itself ineligible for the postseason. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this was dating back to violations in relation to the Chuck Person scandal. This doesn't seem like that's ever going to get rid of it, does it?
No. Well, we thought it was done before. And I think this was the last, straw of, we'll declare it so that way the NCAA can get off our tails, maybe, even though that will never happen. You would like to say this is the last of it and the last time we'll have trouble with that incident of Chuck Person and all that. That was, about 4 or 5 years back. Hopefully we're done with that. Hopefully that's in the past.
So do you truly think that we're done with at least the Chuck Person issues?
I think Auburn is done with it. I can't speak for the NCAA because I don't think anybody can speak for the NCAA.
It's definitely one of the more befuddling organizations out there in many aspects, but just the way here's the thing too, is, it's one thing for the Auburn fan base to be, moaning and groaning about Sharif Cooper and them not giving an answer on that, why, we're having to do this, postseason ineligibility thing. But when there are commentators on the national level declaring you need to give Auburn an answer about Sharif Cooper, and that's about the time that they finally gave him an answer, is when they were getting national pushback on that, because there were commentators that wanted to see this dude play, and I'm sure there were probably NBA scouts and coaches wanting to see him play to see if he was worth taking a shot at, which we will find out in the near future. So ineligible to participate in the SEC tournament, in the postseason tournament, in any fashion. And, the interesting thing is with this, it almost made for me, the regular season more important, because there was kind of this feeling, at least for me out there, that if you just do enough, you're going to get into the tournaments, and then you can really, crank it up a notch, as Auburn has been known to do of late. But for me, it almost put a necessity. It's like, you better make every game count in the regular season, because that's all you got.
Yeah.
And I was hopeful for what that might do for some of our players there, kind of drive them and push them forward. So no postseason for the Auburn Tigers. And with that, let's take a look at the regular season. We'll start off, and we'll do it by non-conference, and then talk a little bit about SEC play. We won't go game by game, but I thought it would be appropriate for us to talk about a few things that stuck out to us. Auburn, all in all, gets out of non-conference play, including the Baylor game later on in the season in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, with only 3 losses. Those losses were to Gonzaga, Baylor, and then surprisingly to UCF. So, Gray, when I pitch this over to you and tell me what stuck out to you in the non-conference portion of the season, what was that?
Oh, I think it was the stretch that we took after the UCF loss. We come in and we went, I forgot where we were at the in that tournament in the preseason, or at the start of the year, where we played St. Joseph, won an overtime game. Jalen Williams looked great, then lost to Gonzaga. We got, ran into a buzzsaw in Gonzaga. And then we go down to UCF and struggle, and really, really struggle. And now you're 1-2, and it's like, okay, Cooper's not back. Well, what are we going to do? And then we go on I believe a 5-game win streak, or 5 or 6 game win streak of, not beating, bad team, or beating Memphis and Troy and Appalachian State, all really good teams. That stretch right there, when, there was no Cooper, there was, the emergence of Justin Powell, and that stretch right there really took this team to the next level before the, eventual hard start to conference play.
Yeah, and remember, this was a little bit of an altered non-conference too, because they took away the Orlando Invitational, which I was hoping to go down to, which was going to host still Gonzaga and teams like that. It was going to be an outstanding tournament, and I was very excited to go down to the most magical place on earth, the Walt Disney World, and take that in. But sadly, that didn't happen. Instead, it was shifted over to the Fort Myers tip-off, which is where St. Joe's and Auburn met up, Gonzaga and Auburn met up. And we got all we could handle out of the Gonzaga Bulldogs. They looked every bit early on and maintained the rest of the season the number 1 team in the nation, only eventually to be outdone by the number 2 team, Baylor, overall. So I want it's hard to say it right now without being probably a little bit skewed one way because of the results of the championship game. But at the time, after we saw Gonzaga, and Baylor. Who did you truly think was the number one team based on how they performed against Auburn?
Based on how they performed against Auburn, I'm going to say Gonzaga because, I mean, like we played really well in that Gonzaga game. We played probably better than we did in the St. Joseph game, which we won. But Gonzaga just looked just flat out spectacular. Mm-hmm. And in, you know, Auburn's defense, we also had Sharif Cooper in the Baylor game, and that was away from, you know, that wasn't at a neutral site. That was at, you know, in Waco. So, and, you know, we had chances to, you know, maybe come away with a win that game. Mm-hmm. You know, only losing by 12, but you go and lose by 23 to Gonzaga early in the year, and then you lose to UCF. And now it's like scramble mode. Gonzaga, I would have said Gonzaga, but now obviously we know from the result of the championship, it was Baylor.
Yeah. I remember after the game, I looked at someone, I said, I know we just got our butts whooped by Gonzaga earlier in the season. That's the best team in college basketball.
Absolutely.
And, you know, sure, it becomes because they faced against Sharif Cooper and did a good job of putting him in check. I mean, if you look at just kind of the leaders, Jalen Williams was the leading scorer with 17 points, whereas Cooper had led the way a lot of the season he had been there. You know, there was a time where he was scoring 28, 25, 28, 26 points per game, and he's not even in the top scoring realm there. And Jalen Williams is your top scorer overall. So I do think Baylor obviously, you know, worked out the way I thought it would. But those were two very good teams, and it's nice to see Auburn playing the top teams out there, and not just for the sake of getting beat up on, but to go and try to make a statement. I don't know what statement was made this season, but it was nice to see us in competition with them. The most frustrating thing for me was that UCF loss, because this is a time where Auburn, you know, it's clear that Sharif Cooper's not coming back anytime soon to start off and be the point guard. So Auburn and Tyrell was not working out at point guard. So Auburn was really kind of left in the situation where what do you do? Well, again, this is painful to talk about because he just decided to, for some reason, go to Tennessee. But Justin Powell burst onto the scene and just starts lighting it up as the point guard. 26 points after that UCF game against South Alabama, against Memphis. I mean, he was just outstanding, and that's not even his true position. And there were people that were already putting him I think he was in the second round projected. Correct me if I'm wrong, in the early part of the season, because there was a moment where it was Allen Flanigan, Justin Powell, and JT Thor all predicted to go in the NBA draft early on the season, if I have that information correct. So I know it stings, but what did you think about Justin Powell early on?
Early on, he was fantastic. I mean, he was, you know, he was the point guard that we needed without, you know, with Tyrell not working out and Cooper's not back yet. He was the guy that needed to burst onto the scene as the point guard because, you know, at the time, Flanigan hasn't really developed that part of his game, you know, kind of bringing the ball down the floor and getting the offense set up. And Powell took on that role of doing that, and he played fantastic through that stretch. And the win came from it. It showed through the box score, and it showed through the W column. He was great.
Do you miss him?
No.
Well, sadly, we didn't get to see him for much longer after his short stint in non-conference in the beginning of conference play. I forget which game exactly it was, but he suffered what was a very surprising
game.
Was the A&M game. I matched up about right where I thought it was. He suffered a concussion in the game, and for the rest of the season sat out, didn't even sit on the bench for a lot of time. You know, late in the season, there were a lot of speculation about, was it something much further than that at that point? From most credible, what I would consider credible sources, it really all just ran back to this concussion and how much trouble he was having kind of dealing with the headaches and stuff that come from that. You talked a lot about that a lot with your experience with concussions and said that it can just really just change the way you can even like be around noise and sound and stuff like that. Whatever the reason, but it didn't work out for ultimately Justin to stick around, and he's chosen to go to an SEC rival in Tennessee. So we will see you again, sir, and we will return the favor. But let's talk about conference play. Obviously, we're in a very sad point to start off. 4-game losing streak. You lose Justin Powell. no hope in sight because there's no point guard out there. Turbo's gone at this point. Alan Flanagan's being inserted into the role and honestly not doing that great at it just because it's not his traditional role. And then one Sharif Cooper comes in his debut and scores 26 points. Be honest with me. Did you think it was a fluke that first night?
No,
I thought it was a fluke.
I didn't. I really didn't, just because of the way he was playing, because it wasn't like he got super hot from three, or is making stuff that didn't make any sense. He was driving right by these Alabama guards that, they had their big run in the tournament this year. He was driving right by him and finishing, and he was making these, spectacular passes. And it was like, well, okay, then, like, we found our little point guard here. We ended up only losing that game by 4. I still think about that game and think we really should have won that game, because I think we were the better team on that day, even without Justin Powell, and the way Cooper was playing, really elevated everybody else, including Thor and Dylan Cardwell, and Alan Flanagan got back into his natural role, and even Jamal Johnson, guys like that. They got their point guard back that they practiced with all summer and all fall, and it showed.
Yeah.
And we started picking up wins, got a big win over Georgia, and then Kentucky, only 2-point loss to Arkansas, big win over South Carolina. And then that win against Missouri, it was probably the game of the year. And Cooper, I mean, my goodness, he had 28, 8 and 7 that game.
That leads leads the entire column.
Impact.
Yes. You really got to feel for, what type of player was. If there was any doubt at that point, he made his case known there. In that Missouri upset, which at the time looked really good for Auburn, because Missouri, was kind of viewed as, at one point, the dark horses to win the whole SEC. And they really fell off at the end there. But they were still a decent team. So it was, even, hindsight, it's fine to go back and look and say that was a good win for Auburn. And honestly, I'm glad you brought it up. I think it is the best stretch of the season for Auburn in terms of quality and quantity. They only lose, like you said, to Arkansas, who was the best team in the SEC. I think that was proven by the NCAA tournament results and how teams fared there. Only 2 on the road, and then 4 wins smashed within that. So this is probably the high point there. The problem is you ran into the buzzsaw of Baylor, the last non-conference game, and it really just kind of seemed to spiral out of control a little bit for Auburn at this point. I mean, they lose every game, I think, for the next 7 games. I'm doing math really quick. At next 8 games, there's something like that, except for Vanderbilt, which, come on, it's Vanderbilt, the worst entire thing in the SEC. Don't get me started. I'm not going to go on that rant. There's the postponed Mississippi State game, and it is just probably the worst stretch that Auburn has had in a season in quite some time under Bruce Pearl, because of Sharif Cooper gets hurt during all this, I believe. There's just a lot going on that's frustrating people. There's questions about Justin Powell. So where was your mindset in the middle of all of this? Were you panicking? Were you just kind of chalking it up to just, it's one of those years? How were you feeling?
Yeah, I think it was kind of, I think I started, I don't know if panicking is the right word, but I guess kind of saying it was just going to be one of those years when Devontae Shuler made the buzzer beater against us at Auburn in overtime to beat us, to give us our 3rd straight loss after, coming off of Baylor and Georgia. And then we go to Vanderbilt and, things start to look a little better, but, that Vanderbilt team, you should not beat them by 6. Mm-hmm. You should beat them by 26. and then you had the Kentucky game at Kentucky, and it's hard to win in Lexington no matter.
It's a heartbreaker there too.
Yeah, and you should have won that game as well. And then you had the postponement of Mississippi State, and it was like, dang, that was our build-up win. We needed that right there. And then you go to LSU and get destroyed, and you get Florida and you get destroyed, and then you're like, okay, now we've got 2 ranked teams left on our schedule, and Mississippi State is going to try and get rescheduled. And we're sitting at 11 and 13, 5 and 10 in the conference, and Cooper's hurt. And it's like, yikes.
Yeah, it's definitely was probably the lowest point for Auburn fans. And of course, every year, no matter what, you get these certain fans that are calling for somebody to be fired because they can't handle a little bit of adversity. Yes, who you are. But, I think most of us sat back and realized, well, look, it's not like we're giving up on the season, but we understand the context of this thing.
Yeah.
There's injuries involved. There's, eligibility issues involved. There's COVID-19 involved. It just was not a recipe where many teams could have success with what Auburn had to sustain this year with what they were dealing with. The lack of a point guard outside of Sharif Cooper and Justin Powell, which never got to play together. There was, a shining light at the end of all this. For whatever reason, Bruce Pearl just loves to beat Tennessee. They go into Auburn Arena, number 25 Tennessee at the time, and get a solid 77-72 win. I mean, if there was ever... Here, I'm going to make a joke. It's probably in poor taste, but I hope everybody will just take a breath for a second and just realize this is all in fun. If ever there was a vaccine we needed, it was the Tennessee win. I'm sorry. Okay. Probably just offended somebody there, but sorry, get over it. But anyway, okay, that was just me being rude. The Tennessee win was definitely, obviously something that was very much needed here. What does Bruce Pearl do is it just that he has still this angst towards them, that he just has this drive to beat them? What do you think?
Maybe I kind of hope so, because it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop.
Which is what, again, Justin, why would you go to Tennessee? You're just going to lose to Bruce Pearl. Why? Doesn't make sense, man. But
you're right. That Tennessee game is what we needed, because you see, if we lose that game, that's going to be 6 straight losses, because you go to Bama and you're not going to win that. And then you're like, well, we need this Mississippi State win because we just need something for the end of the year, because that's like 6 in a row or losses after the Vanderbilt win. And before that, you had 3 losses. So it was just downward spiral. And that Tennessee win helped. It helped. Not really it didn't do anything for the season. It didn't really do anything to Tennessee, but it really helped the kind of the moral of the rest of the year.
Hey Auburn fans, I want to take a quick timeout from this episode to bring your attention to something very special. Here at the E2C Network, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best content for Auburn fans out there. And best of all, it's free to you. But just because it's free doesn't mean there aren't costs, especially when you have a library of hundreds of podcasts, videos, blogs, and more. Many of you have reached out and asked how you can support this network in the past. Well, now I have your answer. It's called the E2C Network Booster Club over at patreon.com/E2C Network. There you'll find a membership monthly reward system where you can sign up for as little as $1 and get different perks at different tiers. Some of those perks include things such as apparel, eligibility to join us on future podcasts, recognition as an E2C Network booster, exclusive communications, and bonus content that is available nowhere else. If you love this network and want to help us keep producing podcasts like this one, please head on over to patreon.com/E2C Network to join the E2C Network Booster Club. You can also get there by going to our website, e2cnetwork.com/support. Whether you decide to join or not, we are still so appreciative that you would support us by just listening and being here, because each and every one of you is part of our E2C Network family. Well, that's it. Timeout's over. Let's get back into the episode.
What would have been a punctuation mark, and the problem was you had to go play number 8 Alabama in Tuscaloosa. They were celebrating the Iron Bowl win too, and it resulted about how you thought it would. With Alabama surging at that point of the season, thinking they were just the world beaters. Hope y'all are enjoying those Sweet 16 wings, by the way. 70-58, though, they get the win over the Auburn Tigers. And we thought that was the end of the season, but luckily we got Mississippi State to reschedule, and we got a game in Auburn Arena. And, I know I don't want to talk about moral victories and stuff like that, but there was just something that was almost serendipitous about the fact that we got to reschedule that and get the win. It kind of put everything to bed for everybody there. Flanagan, for all his struggles that he had coming in to try to fill the point guard role, which he was not suited for, and I think he would say that as well. He is best suited as a 2. He gets the leading score that night, 22. Outside of that, Auburn finishes this game, and there's a lot of questions out there, which we'll address in just a second. But that's how your season ends for the Auburn Tigers. 13 of 14, just one shy of a 500 year. You know, if a ball bounces differently here or there, this is more than a 500 win team.
Well, we beat Ole Miss if a ball bounces differently.
If you know, a basket goes in, or you make a few more free throws against Kentucky, you know, there are several. Arkansas, you know, that's the thing here.
Alabama.
Yeah. All kinds of games you can point out here where Auburn was in position to win and had things just happen just slightly different. Auburn done a few things better. They would have gotten probably a much better record. And in a year where postseason might have been an option, you might have seen this team, had they made a decent run in the SEC tournament, might be on the bubble, even with some of the struggles they might have had at the end of this. So all in all, what is your takeaway from the season that is 2020-21?
Yeah, you know, I guess, you know, later on when we're, you know, after we win, you know, from the next 5 national championships, of course, you know, we're going to look back at this past year, and we're going to be, you know, of course, we're going to think about Powell, you know, we're going to think about Sharif, and we're going to think about, you know, Flanagan coming on as well as he did, and Devin Cambridge having those nights, and Jamal Johnson and
JT Thor,
all these guys. I think it's about the personnel that we had on this team. I think it, you know, as much as people probably don't want to hear this, it's as good as a build year as you can get, especially for those sophomores who are going to be juniors next year. Because, you know, as bad as, you know, that year kind of spiraled down, you know, especially in conference play, you know, we weren't the worst, but we're building.
Can I give everybody a consolation prize? You beat Kentucky in the categories that matter. You beat them one time this season. They're 9-16 on the year. They missed the NCAA tournament, as do many of the Blue Bloods this year. Just a weird year all the way around. Yeah. And Auburn's one of the Blue Bloods, I guess. So, you know, I guess it fits the narrative. But obviously it was in some ways unfortunate year, in some ways very at times demoralizing, but there were a lot of things that happened. And I guess it would be remiss if we don't kind of like close out our discussion with this way. How do you process, and like when questions come up, how do you rank Sharif Cooper in terms of his time at Auburn? Because it was so short. Yeah. Like how do you even begin that conversation? Because you cannot deny his talent and his ability. And I think we'll see that on the next stage, but I don't know how to do that. Do you?
No, especially right now. I think it's hard to, you know, relate him to some of these former guards that Bruce Pearl has had, like McCormick and Harper and Kareem Canty and those guys, because he didn't play a whole year, and some of those guys played more than a year, and some of those guys, you know, got to go to the postseason and made runs in the postseason. So it's hard. It's difficult right now. But I think later down the line, we'll be able to kind of make that comparison, because we're going to see the impact that he's going to have at the next level, and kind of show what impact he makes at the next level, not just for him and for the team where he goes to, but also for Auburn and for recruiting stuff, and for, you know, him coming back, and because all these players come back and, you know, or watch the old games or watch the games, and so I think it'll have a big impact. I think it'll have an impact like these, you know, really great Bruce Pearl guards have had. But he didn't really do it on the floor as much, not because of his talent or impact, but because of his opportunities he got.
I think the way I like to look at it is this, and obviously I agree with you. It'll take some time to really put that in perspective. I even had a conversation with someone, maybe it was on the YouTube lives, about comparing where he fits in with guards and stuff. I think there's no denying that he's easily in top 5 point guards that's ever had. That's not a question, but, you know, it's hard to look at the body of work of a Jared Harper versus the body of work of a Sharif Cooper and say that Jared Harper's not a better option there. Yeah. You know, that's a hard right now comparison to even try to make, because Jared Harper was so good with so little acknowledgement to start off with of how good he was, and what he did with the opportunity that was afforded him. But we'll have that later on the line. But the way I like to look at it is this, if Chuma Okeke was the beginning of something and, kind of started a trend, 2 times in a row with Okoro, and I'm talking about people getting drafted in the NBA draft high up there. That becomes something that's, some people will probably say, well, it's just luck. They got 2. When Sharif Cooper does it, that's reality. That's not a trend. That's not luck. That's not a fluke. So if anything else, Sharif Cooper solidifies that this turnaround for Auburn under Bruce Pearl is no fluke, is no one and done. It is a reality. And so if that's the legacy of Sharif Cooper, I'm good with it. Yeah. But that's, I think, a nice way to tie the bow up there. As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we have done some other already postseason shows where we just needed to go ahead and talk about transfers in, transferred out. We've mentioned a few of those throughout the show tonight, but if you want to listen to more of those discussed in detail, you can go back a few episodes in our archive and check out some of those, whether it be about Wendell Green coming in, Zep Jesper, Justin Powell leaving. We even kind of started talking about some rumors that have become reality. Let's talk about one of those right now, because literally broke the internets for a little while there. I forget what night it was, but Auburn gets Walker Kessler from UNC. Your reactions, your thoughts on this addition. Did you expect it? Where are you at on this?
The first transfer episode that we had, we were discussing, the Zeb Jasper, and then the transfers out, Jamal Johnson transferred out, and Javon Franklin and Turbo and all those guys. And we were also talking about Cooper, and then we were like, well, let's, think about, other transfers that are out and just randomly are out on the market right now. And, we brought up Walker Kessler, and I was like, there's no way, no shot. He's either going to Gonzaga or he's going back to North Carolina. And that was kind of the premise of what we saw from him, throughout most of the time he was in the portal. All of a sudden, we get this major push from Auburn, and people are like, hey, listen, he's going to Auburn. It's Auburn or he's going back to North Carolina. And then Roy Williams retired and Hubert Davis was named their head coach, and Hubert made a big push for Kessler. And I think nearly got him to come back. But man, oh man, Walker Kessler, the 7'1" center who can shoot, he can protect the rim, he can run the floor, he can post up, he can do everything. The former 5-star is coming to this Auburn basketball team. I mean, man, oh my goodness.
So let me ask you this. Auburn's had a lot of 7+ foot centers that have come through their program in the past, and some here now. And, I don't think it's unfair to say that sometimes the hype is a little bit more than what the reality came to be. I think that's a fair statement. I think Austin Wiley is the only one that kind of lived up to that height, and even he kind of had some moments. Some of that was due to eligibility and injury issues, to be fair. But I think he ended his career on a very strong note, and how dominant he was in the SEC. Is Walker Kessler going to be the guy that finally comes in as a true center for Auburn and just makes a name for him? Do you feel that this is the time?
Yes.
So you're saying starter day one?
Yes. I think he was promised a starting spot. And I think that's why he's here, because I think Carolina also offered him a starting spot with all the stuff that's going on at North Carolina. But this guy, he's higher rated than Sharif Cooper in that class. So now you're talking about Cooper is now the 3rd highest rated recruit.
In less than a year. In
less than a year, he's already at the 3rd highest rated recruit. This guy was Mr. Basketball in the state of Georgia. We're going to have our front court is going to have back-to-back number 1 players out of the state of Georgia. Oh my goodness.
My goodness.
So, Walker Kessler did not average a bunch of points, average a bunch of rebounds or a bunch of blocks at North Carolina. It's because he was playing under guys like Garrison Brooks, Armando Bacot, and Day'Ron Sharp. All of them were ahead of Kessler in that last year of the Roy Williams era. But you go look at Kessler when he was given the moments and the minutes and the impact that he had and his advanced, it's absurd. It is absolutely crazy. You talk about potential. This guy's got potential to be an all SEC type player. This guy's got potential to be an NBA player for a long time, because, he's not a back to the basket, center like Austin Wiley was. He is a He's a do-it-all. He's a great passer. He's a great shooter. He got a beautiful shot, beautiful mid-range. He can run the floor. He's 7'1". He's long. He's a fantastic, rim protector. He had a game in the ACC tournament this year when, North Carolina wasn't playing out of their minds because all the Blue Bloods really weren't, including Auburn. He stepped in and made such an impact. He had 20 minutes. He had 16 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 blocks. Broke the freshman record in the ACC tournament for 8 blocks. It just shows you the kind of impact he can have on both sides of the floor. Really, really excited about this guy.
Do you think that he will be utilized alongside Jalen Williams? Now, Jalen's shorter than him, and he's a different style of front court man. But do you think this is a situation where they're utilized together, or as in kind of a package or a situational thing?
I think you kind of gotta wait and see, especially on scouting other teams, because that's something that we made with the talent in the front court, especially if a guy like JT Thor comes back. You got Kessler, you got Jabari, and you got Jalen Williams, you've got Dylan Cardwell and stretch, and you got Chris Moore kind of as a forward, and then you got Thor, and then so with that talent, I mean, it's a great problem to have because I think you got 3 starting spots out of those guys, and Jabari and Kessler have to be 2 of them. Yeah. So,
and I would argue that Jalen Williams has earned his keep as a starter.
I agree, especially with the way he improved so much this year. If he improves that much, next year, how do you not start him? But it's a great problem to have. The lineup projections, especially if Thor comes back, you're looking at a tall team, and a very long team. If that,
it's a good problem.
It's a great problem to have.
I just looked very quickly, and I'm doing some very quick math, so forgive me if this is a little off, but I think it's 6 games that Williams led us in scoring, and that's some of those are with Sharif Cooper in the lineup. Yeah. Most of those are without, to be honest. But I think if you think that Jalen Williams is not in the running to be a starter, even with Jabari Smith, even than Walker Kessler, I think you're discrediting how valued Bruce Pearl is for him. So it's going to be interesting to see how this thing shakes out. We talked a lot about maybe next year Auburn runs a platoon system, but this was before Sharif Cooper decided to leave, JT Thor, before all these players were leaving, we were talking about a platoon system.
Yep.
I thought that was not going to be a reality. Now I think it is again. And it really hinges upon how this backcourt shapes up with the point guard situation and shooting guard. Yeah. We'll see. Auburn has the potential to be very, very deadly and very, very deep, only enhanced by the recent addition of Desi Sills from, my goodness, Arkansas. I mean, one of the best teams in the SEC. I mean, he just gave us fits all season. Never saw this coming. I think I was only shocked more by Walker Kessler deciding to come to Auburn because it just wasn't a position that we necessarily needed to have filled, but I will take it. Desi Sills, we needed his position filled. We needed another combo guard. I would have liked to have gotten another true point guard so that we could have 2 of those battling it out. But he's got a little bit of that in his background, not at the collegiate level, but at the high school level. But it sounds from what a lot of people are talking like he'll be a nice third option behind Zep Jesper and Wendell Green, who are going to be duking that out to see who's probably going to be the starting point guard this season. So your reaction is about this addition for Auburn at guard.
It's great. It's great. Desi Sills is a combo guard. He's a lefty. He's more of a driver. He can knock down outside shots, but that's what he did. He drove. We talked a lot about after the Arkansas game where they came and dropped 97 on us in Auburn Arena. It was straight line drive, straight line drive, straight line drive. He's a fantastic free throw shooter. He's experienced at the SEC level, which obviously is huge to get a guard that's experienced at the SEC level. We were trying to get Xavier Pinson, and he went to LSU. The big value on that is he's got experience at starting at guard at the SEC level, and that's what is so valuable. You've seen 3 guards, do that, but Pinson, Sills, and Powell leave with starting SEC experience. So it's a great pickup. I think he kind of fits in that 2 guard range, And depending on where you put Flanagan, if you put Flanagan at the 3 or the 2, I think you can kind of fit him at both. And then Trey Alexander's fit in right behind him. It's another great problem to have.
Mm-hmm. I think I would like for our depth at guard to be just one extra player full. Personally, there is an open spot still, and that appears to be JT Thor's. He is still, considered the NBA draft. He still, as far as we know, has his eligibility, which he announced he would try to keep for as long as he could without signing an agent and everything that entails with that. So most people are assuming that that is his spot to keep. It kind of begs the question, if he decides not to come back, who fills that role? Is it another guard? Does someone reclassify and come up? There's some speculation about that overall. But you and I were talking pre-show. You think there might be an opportunity just to leave that spot open to have a little bit of extra room for people coming in?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to have. We see that in the NFL and NBA a lot. Not all the time do they go to the 53-man roster or the 15-man roster in the NBA because they kind of want to have that extra eligibility available. I have that extra scholarship available in case somebody goes down midseason or we get an eligibility issue. They can go get somebody right then at the position that is needed. So, and that was the problem that we had last year. We had every scholarship full. So, and we were playing guys like Laura Behrman, which nothing against Laura Behrman. He probably shouldn't be on the floor in an SEC battle.
To his credit, though, he, in terms of walk-ons now turned scholarship players that have seen floor time in recent years, he seemed the most capable out there.
I agree. I'm going to second that.
There was, I remember, I think we even talked about it on the show. I was like, you know what? I didn't even catch up when I saw him out there like 2 or 3 games in a row. I was like, oh, okay. He just needs to come in and give somebody minutes. Like, it wasn't me like, what's wrong? Why is he in?
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a spot eligible. It seems like it's JT Thor's. Does he want it? We'll find out. And that's all we can, we can only operate off of what we have. So with that in mind, as I love to do to my co-host sometimes, I'm going to make you right now on the spot, pick your starting 5 based only on what who is here right now. So I have to remove JT Thor, but who is your starting 5?
Okay. I'm going to go with Wendell Green at the 1. I think he is a Jared Harper clone. Bruce Pearl really sees Harper in him, or a Kareem Canty clone. And I think Jasper's experience could, win that, and that I'd be perfectly fine with that as well. I'm gonna go with Green at the 1. At the 2, I'm going to go with Desi Sills. I think we go small. I think with Thor, it's a little different because Flanagan's got to be on the floor. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a little different with Thor. We don't know what Thor's doing right now. Right now he's in the draft. But I'm gonna go with Sills at the 2 and Flanagan at the 3. That puts Flanagan back in his natural position. He played, and we saw it this year. The improvement from last year to this past year, was incredible for Alan Flanagan at that position. He struggled when he got into the point guard position, but that's not the position he plays. So give me Flanagan at the 3, and give me Jabari, the number 1 power forward in the country this past year. I mean, Mr. Georgia, Mr. Basketball in Georgia. Dude's got to start. And give me Kessler at the 5. So that's got Jalen Williams coming off the bench. And that blows my mind. It's also got Devin Cambridge and Trey Alexander and Zep Jasper and anybody else coming off the bench. And the depth of this team is going to be incredible, especially if that last spot is filled with JT.
So again, operating off of the assumption that JT is not here, I'm going to disagree with you just slightly. Okay. I do agree with Wendell Green, although I think it's just as equally likely that Zep could pull that off. And I think the lineup hinges upon who is going to be the point guard, because I think that would change my assumption. But I'm going to assume for now Wendell is going to be the point guard. I think you've got to put Sills in there at that spot or some combination. I think Alan Flanagan too has got to be in there for a smaller type of lineup. I got to think that Jabari Smith's going to start. I just do. You don't recruit a guy like that and not start him.
Yep.
Same kind of thing for a transfer situation for Walker Kessler. However, I do think that he will start by the end of the year. And I know that I'm putting someone in position, but I'm going to say Walker Kessler does not start the year. I'm going to say Jalen Williams does, and we go with a smaller type of lineup. Bruce Pearl traditionally likes that type of lineup. Yeah. That's where he's been most successful at Auburn. We've played for several years with no one above 6'8", it felt like, and still we're pretty good. So I do think that Jalen Williams, people get upset for some reason when you talk about seniority and some like things that are earned by some players, but I think there's something to that. I don't understand why people get upset by that, but I think if anybody's earned that, Jalen Williams has. Yeah. So I would not be shocked to see Jalen Williams in the starting spot and either Jabari or Walker not starting to start off the season. But maybe that changes as time goes on, to seeing how the team flows together. So no matter what you think about the starting five, there's really not a bad way to go with it.
I agree.
And that's without JT Thor in the mix.
Yeah. Well, you had Thor. It changes.
Absolutely.
I know what to say.
I can't make a case for Jalen after that point. I'm like, Jalen, I'm sorry, man, but like, it's JT Thor. But right now I do think Jalen Williams is going to have the inside track as long as he can continue to show his progression, continue to show what a leader he is on the floor. I think that's invaluable. And not to say that Walker and Jabari won't be leaders, but that's hard to beat in a team that's had so much transition, so much, in and out the rest of this in season, but all season as well. So I think that's invaluable. And I think Bruce Pearl recognized that. And what was the one thing we talked about a lot this season? No leadership, but there was a trouble of finding who was the leader on the floor. Jalen Williams, my friend, is going to be your leader. And I think that's why he potentially starts this season. So there you go. That's the predictions there. How about one more prediction? Where things stand right now, how far does Auburn go in the tournament next year?
Elite Eight.
I will say I think anything below a Sweet 16 is a disappointment at this point. So I'm going to just rest there for right now, but I think it's highly likely they could make an Elite Eight as well. But Sweet 16 should be the expectation.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at, folks. The 2020-21 season is done. It is over with. We can remove it. You don't ever have to talk about it again, Gray. You will.
That's fine.
But Sharif Cooper was in it, so we have to talk about it.
I guess. But so was Justin Powell.
Trust me, you'll get to see him again. So, hopefully it'll be a fun reunion for him, and we'll have to show him that he made a mistake for whatever the reason that he decided to leave us. So where do we go from here with Inside the Jungle? Most of you that have been around our network for the many years we've been doing this know that when we shift into off season, we don't have a regular schedule, obviously, because there's no games being played or anything like that, but we will try to get an episode at the very least once a month to you. Obviously, there's going to be some big markers coming up here with JT Thor makes his decision, the NBA draft overall, war ready. How about that? You want to talk about some Auburn basketball in the summer? Are you excited about that, Gray?
I am. I'm really excited, especially with the squad that they got, man. They've got some Auburn guys.
Did you see, I'm trying to remember who it was. One of the Auburn players that's currently on the team had a rumor about some names. Did you see some of those names?
I did.
Austin Wiley, Mustafa Heron. What do you think about that?
There's some good ones already on that team. And
now, I'll be honest, having Mustafa potentially on there and Kareem Canty, they kind of left us a little bit and hurt, but hey, they're Auburn people still.
Yes.
So we'll be talking a lot about that in the off season, as I'm sure there will be some slow periods. We'll probably do some fun topics, maybe looking back at top 10s and all that kind of stuff, old games and things like that. We'll come up with some creative stuff. This is not the end of Inside the Jungle. There's plenty more to talk about just on a less regular basis. Gray, you have been a trooper this season. You came in mid-season. There are fans and listeners that are still applauding you because they kept, you allowed them to not have to listen to just me yammer on forever, even though I still do that to some degree. But thank you so much for being willing to step up to the plate and become part of the show.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is my dream, to just talk about Auburn football, Auburn basketball, Auburn sports, Auburn in general, and just do that in such a fun way like this. And, the season wasn't, we wanted it to be, but there's brighter things ahead. I can guarantee it.
Let me just tell you this. You did not start this show like Clint and I did in the very first year of Bruce Pro. You want to talk about a rough year to start with? And now it ended great with that SEC tournament.
Yeah.
I'll always remember KT Farrell hitting that shot and how we just gushed about that for probably an hour on one show. But it was a rough year. So you definitely had a little bit of a better start, albeit a little bit frustrating too. But anyway, thank you. Thank you all to the listeners for sticking with us this season. Stay tuned for more episodes coming up from us probably very, very soon. Get excited. More Auburn basketball is just around the corner. Until we talk to you again, War Eagle.
Before you get out of here, we want to remind you of a couple things. Head over to e2cnetwork.com, our website where you can find everything that you'll ever need from us, podcasts, blogs, and even ways to help support the show. If you want to find individual episodes, you can download all of these on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. So until we see you again, I want to remind you of one thing, that here at the network, we believe in Auburn and love it. The only question remains, do you?